Most people board a plane believing that flight attendants treat everyone exactly the same, and that quiet politeness and good manners are just old habits nobody really pays attention to anymore. Many senior travelers assume kindness from the crew is automatic, something owed to them simply because of their age. The reality is very different. Cabin crew notice far more than passengers imagine. The tone of your voice at the door, the way you manage your carry-on, the words you exchange with the gate agent before you've even reached your seat, all of it registers. In just a few seconds, an invisible impression takes shape, and that impression quietly steers the rest of the flight. From the extra help you're offered, to the warm smile you receive, and the small favors that nobody ever announces out loud. What follows is what a former flight attendant would tell you about how cabin crew really see senior passengers. The small habits that win them over instantly, and the ones that work against you without you ever noticing. Here's the first thing worth understanding. Cabin crew form their opinion of a senior passenger within roughly the first 90 seconds. Most travelers assume that judgment happens later, once the plane is in the air, once drinks are being served, once real conversation begins. That's simply not how it works. The impression starts forming the instant a passenger appears at the boarding door, long before the seatbelt sign ever lights up. A calm greeting, a steady walk down the aisle, a quick glance to locate the seat without holding up the line. Every bit of it gets absorbed immediately. Crew members are trained to read passengers quickly, both for safety and for service, and they tend to watch older travelers a little more closely, simply because needs around mobility, hearing, and comfort vary so widely from one person to the next. A passenger who smiles, states their seat number clearly, and moves with quiet confidence sends an unspoken message that this person is easy, aware, and likely to have a smooth flight. Someone who appears flustered, irritated, or impatient in those opening moments sends the opposite signal, quietly putting the crew on guard for possible trouble down the line. This isn't about judging anyone's worth or dignity. It's pattern recognition, built from thousands of flights and hundreds of new faces every week. The human brain naturally sorts unfamiliar people into fast categories: easy or difficult, calm or tense, aware or distracted. Once that first label lands, it colors nearly everything that comes after. The tone the crew uses, how patiently they explain things, even how often they check back during the flight. The encouraging part is that this window swings both ways. A senior traveler who understands it can turn it to their advantage, instead of being shaped by an impression they never realized was forming. Before we continue, let me share something quickly. Growing older doesn't mean that air travel has to feel harder on your nerves or heavier on your wallet. In fact, airlines offer plenty of perks that often go unnoticed: complimentary services, better seats, help getting through the airport, and small tricks that make the whole journey smoother. Things many older travelers don't even realize are available to them. I've gathered the best of these insider tips into a book called The Confident Senior Traveler. That's the only time I'll mention it, but if it sounds useful, you'll find the link in the description below. Walking at an even pace, having the boarding pass ready, offering a simple hello to the crew member at the door, all of it plants a small seed of ease that keeps growing for the rest of the journey. Even something as minor as knowing which side of the aircraft your seat is on before you step through the door removes the hesitation that crew members sometimes mistake for confusion. It sounds almost too small to matter, yet former crew describe those first 90 seconds as one of the strongest predictors of how the whole flight will unfold, for the passenger and the crew alike. Staying calm during boarding matters more than most people think, because boarding is usually the most chaotic stretch of the entire flight. Overhead bins fill up fast. Families scramble to sit together. Announcements compete with rolling suitcases and rising impatience. In the middle of all that noise, a composed senior passenger stands out immediately, and the crew appreciates them far more than those passengers ever realize. A calm traveler doesn't freeze in the aisle, digging through every pocket for a boarding pass, doesn't argue over bin space that's already been taken, doesn't snap at the first minor inconvenience. Instead, they wait patiently, ask a quiet question when something isn't clear, and settle into their row without adding pressure to an already tense moment. Former attendants described this kind of passenger as a release valve during a stressful boarding, someone whose very presence lowers the temperature rather than raising it. What passengers rarely see is how much that chaos weighs on the crew, too, as they count heads, track special assistance requests, watch the clock, and try to keep the aisle moving. A calm senior becomes a quiet ally in all of that, and the crew remembers it even if they never say so. Being calm doesn't mean staying silent about real needs. Quite the opposite. Calmly stating that you need a little more time, some help lifting a bag, or a specific adjustment to your seat is always welcome and taken seriously. The friction never comes from the request itself. It comes from the tone attached to it. A clear, easygoing request earns a fast and helpful response, while a tense or demanding one tends to trigger defensiveness, even from the most seasoned crew member. Seniors who grasp that difference usually receive noticeably better treatment throughout the flight, not because anyone is keeping score, but because people naturally answer calm with warmth and tension with caution. Even a small gesture, like stepping slightly to the side to check your phone for the boarding pass, rather than stopping dead in the middle of the aisle, signals awareness of the people around you. And that awareness is exactly what crew members quietly value most during the busiest minutes of boarding. Another thing few passengers understand is how the call button can quietly work against them. The button exists for genuine needs, a medical concern, a spilled drink, an urgent question, and using it for those reasons is completely fine and expected. The trouble starts when it becomes a reflex rather than a tool, pressed for things that could easily wait until a crew member passes by anyway. A second napkin, a question already answered a few minutes earlier, a request for something the crew was already on its way to bring. Attendants are trained to answer every call promptly, no matter the reason. But internally, a pattern forms fast, and that pattern shapes how proactive they become with a particular passenger. Over a single flight, a crew member may handle 30 or more calls, and they start mentally sorting them into urgent, moderate, and could have waited. Passengers who keep landing in that last group unintentionally train the crew to treat their next call with a touch less urgency, not out of unkindness, but out of simple human pattern recognition under pressure. The frustrating irony is that the people who need the button least often press it the most, while those with genuine ongoing needs sometimes hesitate to use it at all out of politeness. A better approach is to catch a crew member's eye as they move through the aisle, or to mention several small needs at once instead of calling repeatedly for each one. That single adjustment often improves the whole experience because crew respond with more warmth to passengers who work with the natural rhythm of the cabin instead of constantly interrupting it. None of this means a senior should ever feel nervous about asking for help. Real needs always deserve a response, and no attendant resents a passenger who genuinely needs assistance. The point is strategy, not restriction, and even pairing a request with a friendly remark that it isn't urgent can turn a routine call into a small moment of mutual consideration. There's a clear difference between passengers who get standard service and passengers who get genuinely attentive service, and it usually comes down to small habits most people never think about. Certain behaviors quietly encourage the crew to go beyond the basics without ever being asked. Making eye contact during service, instead of staring at a phone or tray table, sends a small but powerful signal of respect, and respect tends to be returned generously. Saying please and thank you clearly, even during a rushed drink service, stands out more than travelers realize, because so many passengers treat the crew as background noise rather than people doing demanding physical work for hours. Remembering a crew member's name from an earlier introduction and using it later creates an instant personal connection that most passengers never bother to build. A simple compliment about how smoothly the flight is running, or an acknowledgement of how busy the cabin looks, turns a transactional exchange into a warm one. Former crew even mentioned that a senior who asks a brief, polite question about how the crew member's day is going often receives noticeably more attentive service afterward, simply because it breaks the invisible wall between passenger and worker. None of these habits cost anything, none take extra time, and none involve asking for special treatment, yet they consistently produce better results. Attendants are trained to treat everyone professionally, but professionalism has a range, from efficient and polite to warm and genuinely caring. And small human courtesies are exactly what moves a crew member from the first toward the second. It's a strange truth about flying that two passengers seated only rows apart can receive nearly identical service and yet describe their flights in completely different terms, one warm and memorable, the other flat and forgettable, purely because of small human choices. Many senior travelers also assume that frequent flyer status, decades of loyalty, or an elite tier card guarantees warmer treatment. The reality surprises almost everyone. Cabin crew usually don't even know a passenger's status during ordinary interactions, and when they do, it barely changes how that passenger is treated personally. Status affects boarding order, seat selection, and the occasional upgrade, but all of that is handled by systems and gate agents long before the crew is involved. Once a passenger is seated, the attendant serving that row has no badge, no notification, nothing to indicate loyalty tier beyond the person sitting in front of them. What actually shapes the quality of the interaction is almost entirely behavioral. Patience, tone, eye contact, and basic courtesy carry far more weight than any frequent flyer number ever could. Former crew describe countless times when a top-tier first-class passenger treated staff dismissively and received polite but strictly professional service in return, while someone in the very back of economy, flying for the first time in years, treated the crew with genuine warmth and ended up with extra attention, small favors, and a noticeably friendlier flight. This pattern repeats across airlines and routes, pointing to a simple truth many travelers are never told. Kindness works as its own kind of status inside the cabin, one that money and loyalty programs can't replicate. Status still has real practical value in better seats and priority boarding. But the human side of a flight, the genuine smile, the extra check-in on a long haul, is earned through respectful behavior rather than any card in a wallet. There's something freeing in that, because it means every senior traveler walks onto the plane with an equal chance of being remembered warmly, simply by choosing patience over entitlement. Some habits look harmless on the surface, but quietly create friction all flight long. One of the most common is holding up the aisle during boarding while organizing a bag or hunting for documents, unintentionally forming a bottleneck that stresses everyone behind, crew included. Another is tuning out the safety demonstration entirely, assuming that decades of flying make it unnecessary, when in fact crew specifically watch for engagement during that briefing, and attentive passengers get quietly noted as easier to work with if an emergency ever arises. Interrupting service again and again for minor requests, rather than grouping them together, remains one of the most common friction points crew describe. So does talking about a crew member in the third person while they're standing right there, or asking a companion to relay a request instead of speaking to the attendant directly, which creates unnecessary distance and can even feel uncomfortable for the person being talked around. Assuming a young-looking attendant is inexperienced and second-guessing their instructions is another frequent mistake, one that undermines trust and safety compliance for no real reason, since nearly all crew go through extensive training, regardless of age or appearance. And refusing to follow simple in-flight instructions out of stubborn habit, staying seated when asked to prepare for turbulence, keeping a tray table down during landing, creates genuine safety concerns and forces the crew to repeat themselves. None of these mistakes come from bad intentions. Most travelers simply don't realize how the behavior looks from the crew's side, and awareness alone usually fixes the problem completely. Once someone understands why a habit causes friction, adjusting it is easy, and the improvement in service is often noticeable almost right away. Crew often say the passengers who correct these small habits become some of the easiest and most pleasant travelers on the whole aircraft, proof that most cabin friction comes from simple unawareness rather than any real difficulty. Then there's the small act that flight attendants remember for years. They interact with thousands of passengers, faces blurring together after enough flights, yet certain people stay memorable for reasons that have nothing to do with wealth or status. The one gesture crew describe most often is a genuine, heartfelt thank you delivered with real eye contact near the end of a flight. Not a hurried thanks tossed over a shoulder while grabbing bags and rushing for the exit, but a brief pause, a direct look, and a sincere acknowledgement of the work the crew did. That moment stands out precisely because it's rare. Most passengers leave quickly, focused on luggage and connections and family waiting at arrivals, with little room to notice the people who spent hours keeping them safe and comfortable. A senior who takes a few extra seconds to thank the crew, sometimes even naming a specific moment of help, leaves an impression that lingers far longer than they'd expect. Crew describe remembering particular passengers years later, purely because of a kind word offered at the right time, showing how much the emotional weight of gratitude outlasts its tiny cost. It even ripples through the crew itself, since attendants often mention memorable passengers to one another during breaks between flights, meaning one sincere thank you can quietly shape how a whole crew thinks about senior travelers as a group. It costs nothing, requires no special knowledge, and takes only seconds. Yet crew consistently rank it among the most powerful ways any passenger can leave a lasting positive mark. In a job full of rushed goodbyes and forgettable exits, a single moment of real gratitude stands out so sharply that many describe it as one of the genuinely rewarding parts of a long and physically exhausting day. After years in the air, what former crew members most wish senior travelers understood is how much power passengers hold over the quality of their own experience, far more than they realize. They wish seniors knew that asking for help is never a burden, that crew are trained for it and truly want people to feel comfortable requesting assistance instead of struggling in silence out of pride. They wish seniors understood that patience during boarding and declaning sets off a ripple of goodwill that follows them the entire flight, shaping tone, attentiveness, and quiet favors along the way. They wish seniors recognize that simple courtesy consistently outperforms status, complaints, or demands when it comes to warm, personal service. They wish seniors would trust the safety instructions fully, understanding that following them isn't about age or experience, but about a shared system built to protect everyone equally. And perhaps most of all, they wish senior travelers knew that crew genuinely enjoy serving them. Seniors are often described among crew as some of the most appreciative and rewarding passengers to work with, precisely because so many still carry a generation's habit of politeness that has faded elsewhere. That reframes the whole picture. Cabin crew aren't silently judging older passengers with hidden negativity. They're simply responding, as anyone does, more warmly to kindness than to tension. Understanding that turns flying from something to merely endure into something a senior can actively shape, flight after flight, through nothing more than calm confidence, simple courtesy, and a genuine connection with the people working hard to get them safely where they're going. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button. We would also be happy to hear about your experience with the topic discussed in this video. By sharing your experience in the comments, you may help other people too. Follow our channel for more useful and easy-to-follow videos. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.